All right, good morning, ZAPCon, and happy day 2. We are thrilled that you are either here for the first time or back with us after an awesome day yesterday. My name is Rebecca Warren, and I am filling in for Scott for MC duties. After he killed it yesterday, we decided we're going to give him the day off today, and I am really excited to be with you. We are about to kick things off with our first session here at ZAPCon. In our mini hands-on workshops that we have slated for the day. To kick things off, we have Grant Ongers leading a workshop on API security testing. I'm sure a lot of you know Grant, but Grant is a global board member with OWASP and ZAP expert and is currently the CTO and co-founder at Secure Delivery, where he is teaching teams how to enable developers to own application security testing as part of software delivery. So with that, I know, Grant, you have a ton of content to get through in 2.5 hours. I'll pass it over to you, and you can rock this workshop.
Thanks, Rebecca. I appreciate your introduction. Yes, so we've got a lot to get through. This is usually a very hands-on session, so we're going to be doing a lot of hands-on switching, which unfortunately today is probably going to involve someone in the background switching my screens around a little. But let's dive into it. Let me pull up. You should be able to see my screen share. This has already been covered. The primary thing to take away from here is REWTD. You'll find me under Root Daemon or Rooted on LinkedIn, Twitter, Slack, Discord, everything else. Briefly about the company, as Rebecca said, we do this professionally at scale using a lot of OWASP projects because we're OWASP is very near and dear to our hearts. Today's session is going to be a little bit of setup. We're going to be doing some OWASP API top 10, the first 5. We're going to do a short break, and we're going to do the next 5. This is a very small part of what is normally a whole day Secure Delivery API security training session, and it's all hands-on. Most of that day has got a couple of slides with some things on it, which are to help you do the hands-on stuff. So let's dive into it. So getting started, first, you've got this already previously. You'll need all of these today, especially ZAP, of course, obviously. But if you can get one of these other 2 to run on your platform of choice, then we'll try run you through that as well. Unfortunately, I have a new Mac and I'm on Linux, and for some reason I managed to break my Linux installation so that it doesn't work the way that it should. So I can't get Wadroid or BlueStacks to run on Linux. And with my brand new shiny Mac with its new processor, BlueStacks doesn't run there either. So I've done this previously. I'll show some slides instead of actual hands-on. But the hands-on works, and you should try it on your own machines. To start with, we need to get the deliberately vulnerable API. And today we're using VAPI. I have created a copy of it on Secure Delivery. This is not our tool. This is an open source project, which is amazing. It's awesome. So you'll see that it is clearly from somewhere else. Make sure that you reach out to the original developers with suggestions. I know that they're actively developing against it. This version is already a new, shinier, improved version using Laravel. So it is quite there's some active development there. There were some bugs, or there are some bugs. They have fixed them. So it's quite cool to see that they're actively engaging with the community. Once you've cloned the repository, which you should just be able to do with github.com/secure-delivery/vapi.git, change into the directory, and then do docker compose up -d. So once you've done that, you should see that it's starting the database. It starts the www, and it starts the PHP myadmin. Now, this is a PHP API. I don't want to poke too much at PHP. We know PHP is generally more difficult to make secure. But using this framework, the framework they have, using Laravel as they have, it has been relatively hard to make things terribly insecure. So the insecurities are clearly, obviously intentional. Although some things just don't work sometimes on some environments. Once you've got the API up and running, we've got, as you can see, part 2 of 5. We've got 3 more parts. Forget my dog. We've got 3 more parts to get through with just getting started. Once you've got the API downloaded, you'll find that there are two files that are available in the VAPI Postman directory. It's the environment and the collection. You're going to install or upload, install, whatever, import those two JSON files. It will give you the collection of APIs so that we can hit those. And it'll also give us the environment setup. And it basically just creates an empty environment with some switches in there. Then I want you to run Zap. And running Zap with those two switches will give you a Zap environment that's set up to act as a proxy for your API. And it will be able to we'll be able to use Zap to hack the API. If you have any issues, just drop that into Discord, and Rebecca will let me know. And in the meantime, I'll go on to some more config. So the first piece of configuration is within Postman. Just got to set up the proxy. So make sure that you configure the proxy in Postman to be both HTTP and HTTPS on localhost. Set up whatever port you want. And then just make sure that when we're hitting it, we're actually going to be hitting it on those ports. And make sure that the host for Postman is pointed at localhost. So this will be the same value that you have set up in your that you're going to be running the API on. In Zap, final bit of configuration is to set up the proxy. So just enable the proxy for all the things. Ensure that the startup configuration, so those two things that we enabled as part of our startup, that they were actually passed through. I had a couple of instances with students going through this class where that wasn't the case. I suspect that the switches were passed through wrong or something like that. So just make sure that those two exist, that you've got a .* in addresses that are permitted to hit the API, and that it's enabled and regex is turned on, and then just disable the API key as well. And then the final piece is in Zap itself, just make sure that you have turned off the HUD. Trust me on this one. It took me a while to figure it out, but if it's on, proxying through the API is going to somehow strangely do weird things. And if we've got that, then I am going to jump into the top 10 in about 60 minutes, or the first 5 in about 60 minutes. If anybody's having issues getting there, please do shout out, let me know.
Yeah, great. It looks like we got a few questions in the Discord.
Sure.
Let me see if I can bring some of those up. I just think a couple of folks are falling behind. Is there anywhere these the slides live that we could share in the Discord so people can get links from those?
Not yet, but I can definitely.
Okay.
I should have done that before.
That's okay.
Sorry.
Well, good. We can share those after. It sounds like, so if you are falling a little bit behind or not getting links, we'll make sure to share those after.
So I think the one with links that's most important is probably actually where the API is. So let me go back to that first one, and sorry, that one. No, this one, which I suspect is the one URL that you most need to have access to.
Awesome. I will share that in the Discord. All right.
Cool.
Perfect. I think this little break hopefully helped folks that were falling behind catch up, and we'll keep moving. Or let's
Excellent.
see, someone's asking, can we go through the config real quick again?
Sure, let's do that.
Okay, perfect. Thanks, Grant.
So once you've got everything downloaded, you want to get the two environmental, the environment and the Postman collection files imported into Postman, and you want to start ZAP using those two config terms. Don't worry too much about the config if you can't copy and paste, because it would be much easier if I could just copy this, paste it into a chat somewhere. But if you can't copy and paste that and run it, we'll show you what it looks like in the UI. In Postman itself, you want to make sure that you set up the proxy on localhost on 990, port 990. And you want to set up, make sure that it is pointing at localhost, the variable that we're talking to in your API environment, unless, of course, you're running. I hope you're not doing that. I hope you're not trying to run this on a separate machine, because then you can, but it's complicated. So hopefully this is all running on the same machine that you're running ZAP on and everything else on. Then in ZAP itself, make sure that you've enabled the proxy on localhost on port 990, or whatever you set up in Postman. Make sure that those two match. Make sure that those settings have come through. So API.star enabled and regex is turned on, and disable the API key. And then the final thing for ZAP is just make sure that you've turned off the HUD. That should pretty much cover you everything that you need to know. And without further ado, or while you're still configuring, let me talk about the very brief pieces of theory in between. So number one in the API top 10 is broken object level authorization. Authorization, and yes, despite my being English and not American, I spell it with a Z because it's auth Z to distinguish it from auth C, which is coming up next. Although with my accent, C and Z sound too much alike. So maybe I should say auth Z rather, like Z attack proxy. This is all about access control, or what actions are permitted against which objects. SOAP APIs expose services, REST exposes data, the objects, indirectly the actions on those objects through CRUD. So what are some of the API-specific issues around auth C? Well, to start with, APIs, unlike applications for the most part, expose loads of almost standalone endpoints by design. So it's easy to overlook the proper checks on a given endpoint, and it often happens. Also, as I talk about a lot, it's very easy to mess up access control for a given set of business logic. We do some things with banking APIs, and it is so easy to have the logic of banking APIs not perform properly. So APIs that change based on the business logic behind it. So when you have a multi-tenant solution, it can also be even more complicated, because then you have scopes to worry about as well. Broken object level authorization is also known as IDOR, Insecure Direct Object Reference, or at least this is one of the attacks against it. Access control, or auth C, is about managing the mapping of permissions on objects, which means that I need to just briefly talk about permissions. RBAC, role-based access control, actually became a thing in 1992 when David Ferrer and Richard Kuhn at NIST formalized it. And it's a way to provide discretionary access control and mandatory access control, which were required in the NIST standard for securing industry and civilian government and secure military applications, respectively. RBAC, the TLDR, is a cost-effective way for both or either of those two concepts to be possible in all applications, not just civilian government and industry and secure military applications, but everything. 1992 was very open compared to today. RBAC is now almost always implemented. You wouldn't dream of having a read-write system without access control. But essentially, RBAC is access control by mapping privileges on objects to roles and then assigning those roles to subjects. It has the advantage of limiting the number of privilege assignments that need to be maintained and reducing cost of implementation. First exercise. And this is where it becomes complicated, because now I have to try and figure out how to switch to a Postman. There we go. So in Postman, the first set of steps is to create a user with post request and then to get that user with the get request. So we're going to click on create a user. Sorry, in Postman, that thing that was open was my API environment. You can see that I've run a couple of things ahead to make sure that some of the stuff still works. But you should at least see that you've got host set up as local host. So we're going to start by creating a user. So in this little text here, we're going to fill in a username. I'm going to go with Grant at ZAPCon. And I'm going to put in a name. I'm going to put in a course. This could be anything. API testing. And I'm going to put in a password. Of course, I'm going to choose a very secure password here. And I'm going to hit send. And with a little bit of luck, I should now see something in Zap, which I do. I'm now going to go get a user. And of course, this Grant ZAPCon is the one that I was looking for. So I'm going to go get a user. And you'll see that it's going to pre-populate it with my host and with my API 1 ID, so the result of the previous API. So I'm going to just hit send. And you see that it gets me my user. Awesome. Great. Fantastic. So we talked about broken object level authorization or access control being messed up. I was able to get this request because I've just created it. And you can see the details of the request are exactly what the details were in my create user. Now the question is, can I modify the request that I've done here to get something else? So let's change the get request to something else. In fact, let's change the get request to simply get a given user ID. Seriously? We appear to not even be checking who's making the call or to which endpoint they're making the call to. So the question is really, does authorization even matter at this point? I mean, do we need an authorized user at all to get users out of the system?
Hey, Grant.
Hey.
We're trying to keep up with what's going on in Discord here, but I think people would like it if you could increase the font size on Postman.
Okay.
Which I know you can. Go up to view and zoom in, I believe.
Yeah, which I was trying to see if it's just control plus equals.
There we go.
That's nice and legible.
Awesome. Thank you.
Mostly.
Keep rocking.
Cool. So simply by modifying the get request to a given user ID instead of the user ID that came out when I did my post, which was 11, I was able to get whatever users I wanted. So if I hit that send on 11, I'll get my details back again. And I can do this for any user that's in the system. And of course, I'm doing it with auth already in place, inherited from the parent. If I took away the auth here and I didn't inherit it from the parent, would I still have the ability to get users? Yes. So there's no authorization happening. So broken auth. It's very easy. Talking about auth or auth-C, let's grab the next one. And I'm going to have to switch again because, of course, that's There we go. I said we talk about auth-C, or authentication, after authorization, or auth-Z. And here it is, number 2. So broken user authentication is the number 2 problem in API security. Auth-C is all about identity. So who is accessing the system? It's the subject described in RBAC, and it's got loads of ways that it can go wrong. Like, do you recognize any of these authentication methods or any of the flaws? Know of any flaws in them? So there's lots, right? Basic auth, API keys, bearer tokens, OAuth2, OIDC, Saml, a bunch of them. There's lots that go wrong, right? And it starts with, the first one is, oh, this is an internal system. It's not going to expose the internet, so there's no need to do authentication at all, right? That's the very first one you'll probably hear. That's a terrible state to be in. Some of these things require infrastructure to manage, like MTLS. Others, the defaults like basic user auth or username and password or the API keys tend to have the secrets exposed. So recognizing if that's happened becomes an issue. Figuring out when it has happened. Managing the cleanup afterwards becomes an issue, especially when credentials are shared, which is often the case. So more than one thing hitting an API has, uses the same credentials as something else. If you do better than those other options, then you have many choices, and many choices mean many ways that things can be done, but it also means that there's no single well understood, properly implemented way. OAuth 2.0, notoriously easy to mess up, not the least because it has nothing in common with OAuth 1.x. OpenID Connect, which often runs on top of OAuth 2.0, or Saml, which is XML based, and deals with both the open things above. So open authentication and OpenID. Many ways to do that wrong. Because I mentioned it, OAuth 2 is open authorization. So technically it's part of the first issue, but because of how it plugs into everything else, it kind of gets mentioned here. The protocol for authorization, fast becoming the de facto standard for everything that isn't corporate ID. And there's probably enough wrong, complicated, and conflicting about the standard to fill an entire week's worth of conversations. You can read all about the standard, the specifications, the examples, and the ongoing discussions on the standard in that very small text at the bottom here. You'll get all the slides afterwards, so don't worry about that now. OIDC, Open Identity Connect, is and this is the most popular form of identity. So the most popular form of authentication layer on top of OAuth 2. There is also confusingly OpenID 2 and OpenID 1x versions that form the origins of OIDC. But Connect is designed with APIs in mind, and it integrates with parts of OAuth 2.0 spec in the protocol. Again, read all about it in the link at the bottom of that slide, if you're keen. Saml, Security Assertion Markup Language, is a protocol for authenticating web applications using corporate identity. So it's the one that tends to plug into things like LDAP and Active Directory. It's able to cover off just about anything we might do with OAuth 2.0 and OIDC, but it's often seen for business integrations. Great primer on Saml is the one listed there, the Beer Drinker's Guide, even if you don't enjoy beer. The explanation is a great one, well worth reading. For a good book that will do an excellent job of detailing more and why each of these makes sense, you can't go wrong with Wilson 2019 Solving Identity Management in Modern Applications. Well worth the read if you are really into building these things, or if you're having to help build one of these things. But it's time to play again. We need to go back to our Postman. Wait, and I need to, of course, go back and share Postman. So API 2. We're going to log in by using some provided credentials, so that we know that this is a valid user logging into the API properly. Now, this I'm happy to copy and paste somewhere, if there's somewhere I can copy and paste it. I suppose if I paste it here, then Scott or Rebecca can do something magical.
I will grab that for you. Yes, thank you, Grant.
Excellent, thank you. So that's the username, that's the password, because awesome passwords are awesome. And when I hit send, I successfully logged in. So I get success true, and I get a token that's sent back to me. If I go to get details, I could send that user key, that authorization token there. So if I go ID equals, no, not ID equals, token equals, then I should get back my user that's logged in.
Grant, will you send me that token so I can share it?
Yeah, the token should be generated, so they should be able to copy the token out on this user login. So it should be part of the response that they get back.
Awesome, thanks.
There is, however, I mean, we talked about how broken authorization, it can, or broken authentication, it can easily be because credentials have been lost. We know users tend to use the same usernames and passwords in many places. So the attack that I want to use here is credential stuffing. We're basically going to try and log in with a bunch of usernames and passwords that we might have access to. Those of you who paid attention when you were importing from the folder the Postman credentials, Postman stuff, you will have seen that there is a folder in there, or at a higher level above Postman, called resources. If you have a look in that resources folder, you'll see that there is a API 2 credential stuffing folder. And in there is a creds.csv file. So that creds.csv file contains a bunch of credentials, usernames and passwords that potentially could be used to log into the system. We don't know that these usernames will exist. We also don't know whether these passwords and username combinations are valid for the system. But we're going to try and attack the system using Zap now to see if any of these are valid. Now, I have, because of how I tend to use Zap, I have created a credentials list that includes, and actually, let me start with sharing Zap. So firstly, you should already see that while we've been doing stuff against API 1 and 2, Zap has been capturing things. You'll also see that Zap has already got some alerts for us. There are some issues in our current implementation. So despite the fact that, you know, not just the issues we've kindly pointed out, that there wasn't authentication on the endpoint, and that there wasn't authentication on the endpoint. There are other issues that Zap has highlighted. But what I want to look at now is trying to attack API 3. Well, API 2, sorry. So here we've got the user get details, and we've got the post. What I want to do is I actually want to modify this post, and I want to modify the request, and I'm going to copy this piece section here. And what I want to do is I want to use the built-in Zap Fuzzer. So there are a number of ways that you can fuzz requests in Zap. The easiest way for me is this route. So I go and do a request properly. I will have the actual request I want. I'll go to the request details. I'll highlight the text that I want to fuzz, and I will click on fuzz. Let me just do that again because I have a feeling that it wasn't sharing at the time. So if I go to the post that I'm wanting to get hold of, I go make sure that I'm on the request tab of it. I highlight the text that I'm wanting to fuzz because those are the texts that I'm going to try and vary between. And I will right click on there and just say fuzz. I will add a payload. We've already created a piece, a fuzz location that I want to use. So I'll just add a payload in there. And we can add strings. I have taken that creds.csv file and I have modified it slightly because, as you can see, I've copied just broadly email and password in there.
Oh, hey, Grant. How's it going?
Good. Scott, how are you doing?
So far, so good. I forgot to share your Zap screen. So if people are asking if you could back up to the beginning of the Zap section and go through it again.
Sure. Not a problem.
That's all on me. I apologize.
No, it's
crew.
It totally not your fault, Scott, because I couldn't share the whole screen. So flipping between them is a pain. Sorry.
The other thing is people are asking if we can increase the font size in Zap, and I don't actually know if we can.
I don't know that we can either. Let's
might have to just make your stream window huge. People who are watching.
Get the magnifying glasses out.
Something like that. Again, we'll have replay of this so we can stop and start, and you can blow it up and all kinds of good stuff. But we'll work on it. And then if you could just restart this section, Grant, that'd be great.
Absolutely, not a problem. Thanks, Scott.
Thanks.
Cool. So what I was saying about Zap is that this is the first time I've shown you a Zap screen since we started actually hitting the API. If you've configured things right, and I hope you have, because otherwise this part's going to be hard, you should already see that Zap has captured requests that went to API 1. And those requests that went to API 1 already showed a number of alerts. Now, these alerts are possibly not super urgent, not super important ones, but it shows that even outside of the actual vulnerability we're looking at, Zap has seen things that we should be fixing, or that the dev team should be fixing, or that the SRE team should be fixing in cases where it's headers missing or things like that. So that's the first thing. The second thing is that you can see that we've hit the API 2 endpoint with a post to log in, and we've also gotten some details with the token passed and just some details randomly. This post section that I'm going to highlight, normally it would be showing this. So if I grab the post request and click on the requests tab, and I highlight the text that I want to fuzz, that's the easiest way for me to get to fuzzing in Zap. Right click on that and then click on the fuzz button. Nice bright red icon.
Oh, hi, it's me.
The pop-up's not showing. I see it.
Pop-ups are not showing. Yeah, we can't share your whole screen.
So if I share my whole screen, you end up with a massive Linux 2-window screen share thing. So it'll be this window that I'm currently looking at, talking to you in.
Window managing the whole desktop.
Yeah.
All right.
So when you right-click on the text that I've highlighted, you should see a pop-up. And that pop-up has find, open resend request editor, and fuzz right from the top down. So if you click on fuzz, then you should see this screen pop up, which is still not popping up.
You might have to reshare it again, Grant.
So let me share that pop-up screen. Oh, wow. And StreamYard doesn't even see that pop-up.
Oh, okay, great. Maybe you could take a screenshot of it and post it in Discord, or I'm not sure what to do at this point.
Or possibly what I do is this. And I go share the whole thing. And then you'll see tons and tons of weird. I don't know if this is going to help. It's going to make things worse, I think. How bad is that?
Let's try it and see what happens. It's pretty weird.
Yeah. Not optimal. Should I go back to what it was?
Probably.
I really wish there was just like a screen 2.
The beauties of Linux, so configurable.
Yeah, sorry, folks. And I specifically went to Linux because I thought at least I could get the APK stuff to work. But anyway, you guys have got the pop-up in front of you because you've been following along. So you're looking at the pop-up and you can see that you've got fuzz locations already selected. You've got a section of text there with email and password that you've highlighted. On the right-hand side, you've got the ability to remove that the fuzz location, which you're not going to do. You can hit the button right below that, which says Payloads. That'll give you yet another pop-up. And in that yet another pop-up, you're going to click Add, the only button other than Cancel that's available to you. And in there, you're going to select Type Strings, and you're going to paste in the strings that somehow are going to get across to Discord, which maybe I should just try and drop it straight into Discord, see if that works.
Yeah, the other thing, Grant, and I'm sure you're going to do this. We're going to get the slides and like an instruction manual to put into the Discord chat as well. We'll pin it at the top for everybody so they can follow along.
Yeah, I am gonna write this all up as a proper step-by-step guide to breaking things. Yeah, maybe kill both of our images. Can you still hear me if you kill my video? If I stop cam?
I can still hear you.
Yeah, but I think they want to have this screen full screen.
Yeah, I know how to
There
do
we
it.
go. That'll do.
Just like that.
That's awesome. Okay, so when you've done that, when you've got, hang on, let me find Discord. And in Discord, let me go to ZAPCon and API security testing. And, ooh, message.txt. Awesome. I'm sure everybody's going to trust that. So I promise that that text file is something you want. So if you copy that text block that massive amounts of text I've just dumped into a Discord, and you paste that into the payload for strings, and click Add, and click OK, and start Fuzzer, then you should see this happening. A whole bunch of requests going past. And that'll run for a bit. And what it's going to do is it's going to find some usernames and password combinations that will log in, because users are users. We've made them use complicated passwords. You saw the passwords were complicated, right? Nobody's going to remember their passwords. Nobody's using password managers. So they're going to reuse those complicated passwords once they've memorized them in lots of systems. So we know that there will be other requests come through. What will happen when that request happens, you'll see once it pops up. In the meantime, I'm going to try and go back to my screen in such a way that I can see everyone and everything. So while the fuzz is running in the background, we are going to jump forward. If your fuzz is not running, don't worry about it. We'll catch up later. But in the meantime, I'm going to share my slideshow again. And we're going to start on number 3 because time is short. So I said it a number of times, right? APIs are all about exposing data. That's the whole point of an API. They provide access to the data the application has, either directly through objects exposed or through services that manipulate those objects. So what does the word excessive exposure mean here, right? Well, there's a couple of things. The first is that developers tend to assume that the consuming application will be the one providing the presentation layer. So it should be doing the cleanup for humans to read, which is often true, right? APIs provide you with a whole mass of data, and then the presentation layer, whatever interface the user is actually using to look at the data. That's going to be some kind of app, and that app is using the API, and then we'll present it in a different way. Developers also tend to think in terms of if they had to build a consuming application, because often they are. But then down the line, the API gets offered to customers or consumers directly. And then the idea is that I'd rather have too much data available to me when I'm building that presentation there than too little. So let's provide as much data as we possibly can through this API call. Those two things combined, together with the fact that APIs are designed to be consumed by developers rather than by end users, will often provide data about how to use the APIs. And you can quite easily see the result in data being shared that no developer would ever intentionally want to share with the world. APIs return raw data. They rely on the consuming app to filter and modify for presentation. And quite often there's metadata in there, right, that the app itself doesn't need. Let's actually go and break something. This is the one where there would be an APK. So if you have access to something that'll run an APK, feel free to go and install and run the APK that's in the resources API 3 folder. If you can run an APK locally, awesome. Make sure that you configure it to run through your ZAP proxy, and then just go in and post a comment, and then view the actual response that comes back from the API. If you don't have the ability to run an APK locally, like I don't, because Linux, and I break my own environment all the time. Fortunately, I have a phone. I have an Android phone, so I installed a intentionally vulnerable APK on my Android phone, and then I took some screenshots of what that looked like while I was using it. So this is kind of what you'll look like. You'll hit the API endpoint. You'll log in with the users, the username and password you had previously. Make sure that you are pointed at the proxy rather than at your actual local host. And then you'll post a comment. So when you log in, you'll see that there's this post is shitty, and you'll see that that's my user that I've logged in as test user, and I commented, wow. The response that comes back from me posting that, however, is the part that's most interesting, the part that's most intriguing. And this is a slightly different response that I posted back. And you'll see that in your response body, you've got an ID, you've got a post ID, got a device ID, which, by the way, in case you're playing at home, the device ID in this case, this is a CTF. You can play this with your dev teams as a capture the flag exercise. All of the winning attacks have got a flag of some kind that you can get from them. So here you can see the flag. It's got some latitude and longitude details. It's got the comment text, the one above. It's got the username. It's got the ID of my post. It's got my device ID as I manipulated it, doing it from my machine. It's got some latitude and longitude that I've manipulated as well, some comment text, and my username. The get after a post of that comment provides way more detail than it should. Now, obviously, this is a super dodgy Android app to begin with, because why do they need your device ID, and why on earth are they capturing where you were when you made the comment? But that's a completely different question altogether, right? What is interesting is that when that information is captured by this dodgy app, it's also provided back as an API response to a get on the post. So just to build up this page, it's returning data about the devices and the locations of the individuals who posted the previous comments. But nowhere is that information ever shown inside this application, right? Nowhere is this data shown anywhere inside the presentation layer of the app. So that is clearly too much information being exposed as a get. You can do the same thing on your device if you just in Zap wanted to go and manipulate this and do a post. you'll see that these details come through. Or if you just did a get of on the API endpoint for API 3, you'd see that the get response would show you the flag already of the device ID for the first post, which should already be in your application. If you can get this to run as an APK and you can show your developers, your mobile devs, that you can actually see what they're posting and receiving, and that you probably don't want to see them posting things or storing data that they shouldn't be storing in the first place, that's a very good conversation to have with them. Exercise number 4. Although let me just quickly check to make sure that there's no questions at this point. Nothing so far. So number 4 is lack of resource and rate limiting. So generally we limit how much data a person can request, or how many times a second a request can be made by a person, or how often they might attempt to log in. These are done by just putting in some values, right? Some reasonable values for a human being. The API versions of these issues are quite simple, right? APIs are supposed to be used by machines. They're supposed to be done far faster and to far greater degree than human beings can do it. So it often means that developers put in no anti-automation. Of course, the anti-automation would kind of be against the whole purpose of an API to begin with. Or they don't put in the right level of rate limiting, or perhaps not even any rate limiting in, because they expect the service just to scale, to handle whatever is being called for. But there's a problem with that. The problem with that is in our exercise 4. So firstly, let's go back to see if Zap has completed that scan. I feel like I am getting better at doing this. So Zap has completed the scan.
Hey, Grant.
Yep.
Someone gave us a Zap tip.
Excellent.
If you go to options.
Yep. Where? Edit option. Tools options. Yep.
General font.
General font. Let's try just finding font.
Apparently there's a font size changer in there.
Display. General font. Font size. Excellent.
More bigger fonts.
This is amazing.
See, everybody's learning today. Oh, I don't have my glasses on.
I don't know how big. I don't know how big I want to make this go. So let's, because it was -1. Let's see what 20 does. Where is it making the font size?
That's a great question.
Oh, wait, that's general font. Font name. Work panels font. Maybe make that 20 as well. Oh, that doesn't want to go. Do I have to restart Zap?
That's a great question. If you can't restart Zap, it's okay.
Yeah, we got a tip on this in the Discord, and it looks like you would have to restart Zap. So I don't know if we can do that right now. Maybe get your face extra close to the screen, and maybe at our break we can do something about the font.
Yeah, I will restart Zap just now, but I wanted to show the results of this because I told it not to save the session. So let me show the results of this before I go out and lose all the results we've got.
Sounds great.
What you're going to look for is you're going to go back into your results screen. I just sorted by reason or code. I'm not sure which of the two I did it by, and then scroll back up to the top to see which ones were valid. I now have 3 successfully fuzzed usernames and passwords. So I have 3 other credentials that I know work in the system. The only reason this worked, or that this was possible, is because there is no rate limiting enabled on the system. If there had been some rate limiting, then it probably would have blocked me before I managed to get all of the details. And I'm getting very confused here. Okay, so it probably would have blocked me before I was able to brute force those 2 additional, to be fair, because one of them is actually the username I logged in with originally. So those two additional users that are successfully in the system. Rate limiting would have prevented that. That's the first part. The second part is we're going to go, and I want to use I want to do stop screen and share Postman. So just for completeness, API 3, if you were going to just use the create a user, log in with that user, post a comment, and then get the comment. If you're going to just get the comments back, you can see that there's the flags are in there. If you just use get comment. On API 4, there is a mobile login, which is a way to sign in. That you're going to try and log in with a username and with a mobile number. It's going to text you a one-time PIN, and then you're going to post using that one-time PIN. So I'm going to trigger a mobile login because I want to ask for a login. That puts the application in the right state to receive a mobile login. I'm going to use verify OTP, and I'm going to hit send, put in whatever number you want into the OTP there. It'll tell you that it's invalid, and that's fine. The reason I want to do this is because I want to have those requests in Zap. I'm going to go back to Zap now. And under API 4, I've got my OTP post with 999, and you'll see that the response back on that was false, failed, invalid OTP. I'm going to obviously do the same thing as I did previously. I'm going to change that. I'm going to just say fuzz that section. I'm going to add a payload. Again, all these pop-ups you're not seeing. In the payload, you can choose to have strings or you can choose to have numbers. If you put in numbers, which are cool, I would start with number 1000 through to theoretically 999, although 998 we know is 999 we know failed, or 49s we know failed, so possibly go to 998. If you want to speed things up a little bit, then you can probably go as, I don't know, as far as 2000, 3000, just to see what it looks like to start with. So in here, I'm going to put make sure I've got the right number of zeros. And increment by 1, click add, and it'll just add a nice ability to fuzz. Start the fuzzer off, and you'll see it'll hammer through those numbers pretty rapidly. Again, this wouldn't be possible, right, if the payloads, if there was some kind of rate limiting. Now, theoretically, what we should be doing with the rate limiting, or with this specific use case, is there should be a set limit to the number of times you can try and fill in the PIN, right? Because if the PIN is being texted to you, being sent to you, you should have it. And yeah, people make mistakes. They may be slightly dyslexic or read too quickly or copy the from phone number rather than the text and try and paste that in. So give them 2 or 3 chances to get it right. But you definitely don't need to be able to run several thousand choices. This will come back with the right number. It will come back with the right answer, and you'll see it'll log in quite happily. What's important about this one is it will still return a 403 forbidden. For some reason, the API doesn't say you successfully logged in because of the way in which the API is expecting that PIN response to go through. So when it's completed, we'll have to find which one has been successful. The easiest way to look at that is to look at the size of the response body, because the response body that comes back is going to be different. So instead of it saying instead of it coming back with a response that says success false, cause invalid OTP, it'll come back with some other details. And that other details makes the response body a different size. So when you're fuzzing, what you're looking for is not necessarily a specific code or a specific response, a specific reason. You're going to be looking at some differences. So something that failed versus succeeded, you're going to be looking for what's different about the one that failed or what's different about the one that succeeded. We're going to leave this to run, jump into number 4, because we are rapidly running through time. So number 5, sorry, that was number 4. Number 5, which I will stop the sharing and share again. That one. So number 5 is broken function level authorization. So we kind of talked about it briefly with number 1. That's object level authorization. This is function level authorization. Basically, it boils down to the same result from a slightly different cause. Right? Previously, the issues of access control and APIs come from the fact that we're inherently exposing endpoints directly for consumption. This is about the complexity of a reasonably constructed API set. So what are the things to look for here? So complexity is a big deal. The areas where this goes wrong is usually business logic, or it's in scoping. So it's either in the types of things you should be allowed to access or do based on the state that the data is currently in, or it's based on the broadness of the scope of data and what your access to that data should allow. Secure doesn't necessarily just mean hidden or not exposed, right? So think about what securing data means in this regard. And with that, it'll make more sense when we jump into exercise 5. So exercise 5 is a little about enumeration and guessing, to be honest, right? It's about trying to figure out what might possibly be going on. So we're going to be looking at, and let me switch to Postman for this one. So in Postman, we're going to be looking at creating a user, and you can put together whatever user you want to create, getting that user back, and then I want you to try and get a user in a different way. You will not have a get user copy in your collection, because that's the modified one that I've created. So we're going to start by creating a user, and we're going to do that as ZAPCon Grant, and we're going to give it a really, let's actually do like a good password, right? You know, one of those ones that your security team would be happy with. We're going to call this a ZAPCon test user. Oh, okay, ZAPCon user. And we're going to have some details. And some telephone number, whatever it might be. I suspect it won't matter what I put in there. I'm going to hit send, and you will see that I get the return back there. I get an ID. And if I go to get user and I hit send, it'll come back with that user I just created. Excuse me. We know that we can probably go and modify this to return a different user ID, and it might return something. Turns out it didn't return what it should. So the error we had previously has been fixed. I can't just randomly grab a user ID by changing the user ID that we're querying for. However, if I query for user ID 3, it should return my details again. So at least we know that access control is set up correctly at an object level. At a functional level, what can I modify about this API? What can I change about this API in order to see potentially more data than I should otherwise be able to see. And the hint I'm going to give you, and we are right on the point for a short break, which will allow me to go and grab some water and allow you guys to play around with the Zap, is the following. And I think I actually have that on my slides. So, exercise 5. I want you to think about finding an endpoint for administration, for admins, rather than users. That's the first hint. You're going to look for some add-ons for Zap in that folder right there, zapproxy.org/add-ons. Check out the FuzzDB add-ons. Importing add-ons is done using this right-click option, Load File Add-on. And what I want you to do is I want you to attack the API using FuzzDB, using the add-ons in FuzzDB. I think we should take maybe a 10-minute break here, if everyone's okay with that. And feel free to bombard me with questions. I'm going to switch across to Discord now. Bombard me with questions on Discord about FuzzDB or about things that you've done previously, and see if you can figure out what exactly the functional level access control issue is with this particular endpoint. And with that, I'm going to go find Discord. I want the screen up for Postman.
Let's see. Grant, why don't I take your video off and then we can see what screens would be helpful. I'll leave your screen sharing going with this slide for the time. And if other slides would be helpful, we can always adjust, but I'll keep that the screen up as is for now.
Okay. I see some really good questions in the chat around fuzzing. Yes, up the number of threads. Hit the maximum number of threads. It's going to crush your CPU, but it will be it will definitely make the fuzzing much faster. I assume people can still hear me though.
Yes. Do you want me to drop your video or keep it up? I can tell if you're going to keep answering questions.
So video up or down doesn't matter. But if I know I'm on audio and people can hear me, then it says instead of them hearing the clack 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 of me typing in Discord, I'll just answer them.
Yeah,
with
that
voice.
sounds great. We'll keep it up. You can answer with your voice if that works.
Oh, the file import issue on Windows. Somebody had this issue, and I know that they fixed it. I think if you don't maximize Postman when you do the import, that helps. And in the meantime, I should actually restart Zap so that hopefully my font sizes.
Yes, and it sounds like if you put that font somewhere between a 15 and a 20, it should work well, Grant.
Okay, excellent. And I suppose what I probably should have done is that fuzzing that I was doing. Oh, you're not going to believe it. They fixed the API. So where I said it may not return a code other than 403 and a forbidden, but look at the byte size, the size of the response body. Indeed, if you sort by size of response body, the bigger response body, which actually returns the key, actually is what you're looking for. Maybe I should share that. So let me share Zap. So there is the giveaway larger body returned. So it's 59 bytes instead of 41, but it actually does return a 200 OK response now. So yay. Previously, you had to just find it based on the size. And that provides you with a key that you can then go and use in Postman. Man, I've got to figure out why suddenly, and somebody asked the question in Discord, why suddenly Ubuntu, because that's the distro I'm using, just doesn't want to provide me with a decent UI. But in Postman, was it API 4 that I was fuzzing? No, that would have been mobile login, right? Yeah, so it would have been API 4. And the payload is there, 1872. That's the one I want. So in Postman, API 4, verify OTP. And it successfully gets through. And of course, that's your flag then that you're going to be using. What other questions do we have in Discord?
We did get a question. Some folks are struggling with how to download an add-on. Is that something you could talk through?
So when you go to the add-on page, it's literally just a zip file that you're downloading. So if I go to one of my far too many browser windows that's open, and I go to zapproxy.org, add-ons.
Grant, you might swap in from Postman so folks can follow along?
Sure.
In the screen share, thanks. You're getting so good at that, swapping the windows, getting lots of practice.
It is absolutely, click allow, Grant. Zap Marketplace, allow.
Perfect.
So the add-ons you're wanting to get hold of are, where did I? FuzzDB. There we go. FuzzDB files and offensive. If you click on that, it'll download a .zap file, which you can just hit save on. Because it's a pop-up, so you're not seeing that. So if you hit on the little download button next to the FuzzDB files, then you should get a .zap file, which you can save. And then from Zap, you go File, Load Add-on File, or Control L. And you're looking for wait, of course. Getting better, but forgetting to do it all the time. And pop up again. So click on File, which doesn't show you what I'm looking at. Click on Load Add-on File, or just Control L. And then you get a pop-up, and then just browse in the window that's popped up to wherever you download the file, and then click Open. And that'll add the FuzzDB files for you. kind of 10 past now. We're going to give everyone a couple more minutes to Oh, that's interesting. I didn't realize there wasn't a download on the info page. So if you actually click through to the FuzzDB files, oh, yeah, well spotted. Have to have Simon do something about it. I guess the only way to get to it is to click on FuzzDB files and then download the file from the GitHub project. Or you can go into Marketplace to download the same add-on. That's correct. So that is in Zap, go to online Zap Marketplace, which opens up the add-ons page directly. And then just click on the download button there. But it's a good point. I didn't realize that download wasn't available. If you click through to the FuzzDB page, it doesn't actually have a download option there for you.
All right, Grant, I know you said you had to grab some water. Don't want to deprive you of that. So if you need to grab that for a minute, we will be here. We need our speaker and our leader for the second half of this workshop.
Yes, I will grab some more. I'll be right back. Just want to share with the world how amazing my wife is. So for those of you still trying to download the add-ons, this is a really, oh, hang on, let me restart. Yep, exit. Oh, wow. Okay, the text is much bigger now. It should be way more legible. Let's see. Reshare Zap. It does feel a little bit like a Duplo version of Zap at this point. But that's all good. All I really wanted was to have API 5 back here. I don't know if this text is big enough for you guys to see it. It does seem a lot bigger to me.
Looks great to me, Grant. Thank you for doing that.
Not a problem at all. Right, what I want to show you guys now is another step of fuzzing, but we're going to make use of the FuzzDB files. Instead of fuzzing the some details inside the GET request that we'd normally be doing. What I want to fuzz is the actual URL that we're trying to get to. I said that we're going to try and guess some things around endpoints that might be useful. Basically, what we want to do is we want to fuzz this part, right? We know it's API 5 that we're looking at. We want to just try and get endpoints on API 5 that might be interesting. So this is what I'm going to fuzz. What I'm going to be using in the pop-up that comes through is a payload. So I'm going to go and add a payload. And I'm going to add one from the FuzzDB files. I see somebody's getting an issue with Zap on installing on Windows or something. Anyway, what you're going to do is you're going to add a string payload. You're going to add a processor to the string payload. And the one we're going to use is the, hang on, no, I don't want to do that. Do that. Modify that. You can add a file fuzzer payload. So when you're adding your payload, instead of the type string or numbers that you chose previously, you're going to add file fuzzers. You're going to use FuzzDB's you'll see that there's a folder there for FuzzDB. What we're going to look for is disclosure. Which one should we do? Essentially use any you like, but the one that's going to be most useful is going to be directories.
Hey, Grant.
Mm-hmm.
People are wondering which FuzzDB thing they should be downloading. Is it FuzzDB files or FuzzDB offensive?
So you download as many as you want and install them all. But the one that's going to be useful right now is going to be FuzzDB files, because
Cool.
FuzzDB files is going to allow us to look for admin style files rather than, end user files.
Sounds good. And then, so everyone knows, FuzzDB offensive has some virus signature stuff in it. So your antivirus might go off.
Yeah, it has fake viruses in it.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Don't worry, it's not actually infecting you.
That's right. But still, just so you know.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Keep going.
So we're going to look at FuzzDB and we're going to look at discovery. And we're going to click on common web methods. And I wish the pop-up worked, but in file fuzzers, you've opened up the FuzzDB, you've opened up discovery, you've opened up common web methods, and you've ticked on the common web methods text file. You click add, click OK, and click start fuzzer. And you'll see a bunch of 500 errors as it runs through the payload, which is essentially common endpoints. And you'll already see that it's hit on the successful common endpoint, the one that we're going to be using, the one that we're most interested in. So there you can see there's a fuzzed 200 OK on the user's endpoint. So if we go back to Postman, and I have to go back to here and share. So instead of doing API 5 user, we're going to do API 5 users. Hit send. So we can't get a single user back if we give the user ID, but we can get all the users back if we just hit the API for the administrator API rather than the user's API. So this is functional level authorization not being done properly. And there's the flag that you would use as part of your CPF. Right. And
Uh-oh.
I think we just lost Grant for a minute there.
Technical problems abound.
Hopefully he'll come right back to us. Give us just a second.
There he is.
Awesome. I didn't have my stand-up bit warmed up, Grant, so I'm glad you're back. I wasn't ready to do that this morning.
So the number of times I've hit that share button and not hit the return button that's right next to the share button is amazing. I'm surprised that it took this long for me to accidentally hit the wrong one.
That's
Sorry
okay.
about that.
Keeps it interesting. Keeps Scott and I on our toes. No problem at all.
Definitely keep things alive and interesting. That's for sure.
Yep.
Okay, so let's jump back to slides. There we go. So we have, oops. Let's try that again. And there and there. There we go. Okay, so we have gotten through the first 5 pretty quickly. I hope I haven't left too many of you behind. We do take more time on this normally when we have a full day to talk things through. We also spend a little bit of time talking about the theory of how, and of course we spend time talking about how can you avoid these things and how can you do them better. In fact, that's the whole point of the exercise, is that we do them better. Today, we're just having fun. We're just breaking stuff. We're not actually fixing anything. The good news is you've all got Zap working. You've got a bunch of fuzzing tools in place. You're warmed up, a little bit more familiar with the API that we're looking at. So the next 5 should go much quicker, which is good because we have about an hour left to get through them, more or less. We're actually doing fairly well on time, as long as I didn't leave too many of you behind. The bad news is that I have to talk about mass assignment now. The reason that this is bad news is because in order for me to talk about mass assignment, I have to talk a little bit about some terms. So some theory. Objects we've talked about, right? They're the instances of data that we're manipulating, and they're the whole point of an API, right? API exposes objects either through directly as objects, as endpoints, or through endpoints that define services that expose those objects. Methods we kind of talked about a little bit as well. They're the services. They're the actions that we're taking on those bits of data. Classes, I've used the word blueprint here because proto-object seems harder for me to explain than it really needs to be for this level of course, this level of workshop. But what it essentially means is that objects are instances of a class. So classes provide the basis for an object, but we can define objects in the context of the method being called. If none of that makes sense yet, there's some reading there at the bottom. The Theory of Objects, which is from Spring of Science 2012. It's a tough read. I'm not going to lie. If you're not a programmer, then this is hard to understand. If you want to have this conversation with development teams, or if you are a dev, you probably understand it intrinsically. But if you want to have a conversation with development teams about this, please read up on methods, classes, and objects. Use that book. You will thank me when you end up discussing this with developers down the line, if you ever have to talk to them about mass assignment. But how does it go wrong? Well, objects are built from the class that they inherit from, right? The blueprint or proto object that they inherit from. And objects can have all the elements of that class despite the method that's being called if it's been set up wrong. So as an example, if you were to talk about a class of let's talk about bank accounts. If you would have an object which is someone's bank account, that object can have the ability to add money to the bank account. It can have the ability to remove money from the bank account. It can have the ability to go into debt. It can have the ability to transfer money to other accounts. All of these things can happen. Those are methods that can be called on that object. Some of those objects' values, like how much money is available to spend, might not be available to every method we're calling. So if you're calling a method in an API to transfer money to a different account, you don't want to have that method have the ability to manipulate the data that's contained in the element of money remaining, right? The method doesn't need that data. The method shouldn't have access to modify that data. Mass assignment is when that isn't the case. The exercise might make this easier. I can't guarantee it though, because it is a complicated thing. We're going to create a user using the post request defined in Postman with some username and passwords. And then we're going to get the user back again. So let's do that. Let me stop sharing this screen and instead share. And do not click on the return button. Share this screen. So in API 6, we're going to create a user, and we're going to with username being ZAPCon 2, because I'm sure I've used that before. Oh, wait, sorry. Username being ZAPCon user with a particular username and a awesome password. And we hit send. When I do that, I get a return back. Cool, your user ID 7, because I've obviously run this exercise a bunch of times, having to re-explain it. When I do get user and I hit send, it returns my user details. So the method post create user, so the endpoint for create user, which is just the user endpoint without any slashes behind it, takes in these values to create this user. So you can see that there is at least a value of ID additional, and it doesn't return the password value, but obviously the password value is necessary. This method, get user, returns the ID, doesn't return the password value, which is a good thing because that would be terrible if the API was just giving you the password for a particular user. But it also returns something called credit. So there is a piece of data that's available in this object, that's part of the makeup of this object, probably inherited from the class, that is accessible through this object. What happens if we modify that post? So if you create a copy of create user, and we simply added to it that value or that variable, and we'll call this this is a name, so ZAPCon user 2 with ZAPCon user, and call it user 2, and a given password, and then some random amount. And actually, what was that get user response? It does look like it's a string. And we'll give it some random amount. I like lots of zeros. So it returns a user ID of 8. And when I do a get user of that user ID of 8, oh, wow, I've got a bunch of credit. And I also have a flag because I've managed to successfully hack it. So despite the fact that this object wasn't supposed to have access to particular elements in a given method, because the proto object or the template object, the class, has those aspects, you can manipulate it. So you can modify the method to provide additional elements that isn't explicitly removed or aren't explicitly ignored. And I've now successfully created a brand new user who has a bunch of money in the bank. Lucky Grant, or lucky user 2. Should have called that one Grant. So let me go back to my slideshow. So as tough as it is to run through, mass assignment is really just about manipulating the values. Manipulating values that you know a particular object can have. Of course, you have to discover what those objects' values can be. That often happens through a bunch of other methods. So the fact that it was given to me in the GET response after I created the user is kind of a dead giveaway when I went and got the user that I just created. But there are other ways that you might have to find out what other potential values, potential elements a given class allows a particular object to have. And then finding a method that doesn't verify which elements are being passed to it and just simply passes those elements through to as part of the create of the object is all mass assignments are about. Number 7, security misconfiguration. This is a broad thing, right? There are so many ways that misconfiguration can be wrong, right? It could be things on the server side, right? Patches are not deployed, or it can be config around how storage is set up. Thinking of a particular bank who had S3 buckets that were accessible to objects that didn't necessarily need to have them. Or it can be error level configurations, right? Providing too much error level or error details to an attacker. It could be protocol set up wrong. It could be the HTTP header set up, right? All of these things can go wrong. There are so many different things that can potentially be misconfigured. This is kind of where ZAP shines, like truly shines. So if we look at exercise 7, right, we're gonna run through a couple of things here. But we can already see in ZAP, if I stop sharing and I share my ZAP again, we can already see all the alerts that ZAP has been producing. And I've mentioned them before because they come through. And of course, I've lost a bunch of them because I've reopened ZAP a couple of times. We've only got the misconfigurations on API 5 and 6 that are visible here, but there are already clearly header information missing, things that are potentially attackable. These security misconfigurations, ZAP is really good at finding. Dash tools are really good at finding them. That's what they do best. What we're going to do now is we can actually switch to Postman, and we're going to use the API. So you're going to create a user with a username and password. And I'm rapidly running out of good passwords. I mean, not that I've been using good passwords ever so far. Now log in to the user, log in using, so user login. Successfully. Use the get key, which is just an endpoint on here. There's my auth key to log in. And if I have a look in Zap, which is easiest to just share Zap again. If you can hide my video because it's covering a bunch of them, or but actually not. The last one, loosely scoped cookie, is the last one on that list. There were 3 errors, but in this one API, we've discovered a bunch more. One of those things is actually highlighted as fairly concerning. Medium concern, medium risk. There is cross-domain misconfiguration. This one is an interesting problem, an interesting attack to do. Because it's an interesting attack to do, this one I'm not going to spend time on now. I'm going to be on Discord. You're going to bug me a lot, and we're going to talk about it. But this is homework. This is something for you guys to take away and chew on, because it's quite a meaty problem to solve. The reason is you actually have to go and craft an attack. But you can see that there is a cause misconfiguration that's on this particular endpoint. So there is something there that we can go and do something about. Can it be exploited? The answer is probably. Given the right level of exploit and given the right that one, given the right time and patience, the exploit is going to look a little bit like this. So this is the starter on your project for creating an exploit to make use of that cause vulnerability. You will have the slides. You don't need to quickly scramble to write down my very poor HTML, very, very poor JavaScript. But this is the starter. This is what you're going to be looking at. So it is a cause exploit. You're going to make use of the fact that there's a cross-origin request. So this is a good attack to work on at home. Some of you have a question that I need to look at, answer?
I haven't seen anything come in. Oh, we actually did just get one, which is if there are custom headers like API tokens, can cores be exploited?
The answer is it can be exploited, but cores is becoming harder to exploit, not just because of custom headers, but also because of how browsers handle cross-origin requests now. So you may find that in order to successfully attack this API endpoint, you would have to either be using a relatively insecure browser, or you'd have to make some manipulation to the code. Both of which I've tried, because obviously I want to make this attack more reasonable, more easy to exploit. There is a successful token for this attack. Honestly, when I first completed the CTF, in order to get the token, I didn't exploit the cause vulnerability. I instead exploited the fact that I understood how the API was put together, and I just asked the API for the token, and it gave it to me, which isn't the right way to get the attack right. I have successfully exploited this vulnerability on this API, but I had to use an insecure browser to do so. It doesn't work by default in Chrome or Firefox. You're going to have to use Internet Explorer, which I obviously run natively on my machine. So otherwise, I would be happy to show it to you. But I don't also want to.
Of course. Of course. All right.
Cool. So this is the
Perfect.
starter.
Let's keep going.
There's lots more to come. There's 3 more to come. So number 8 is injection. Just like with web apps, injection attacks are an issue. Now, injection attacks are much higher on the web app side of things, primarily because of how users interface with applications versus how computers interface with applications. Injection is all about user-controlled input that's used without sanitizing first, right? Any time that happens, it can lead to some kind of injection attack. Mass assignment is actually a specific case of this, right? It's user input that is used to do something that we don't want the system to do. It's a very specific use case, but it's definitely not the only one. APIs are potentially exposed to injection attacks because they have SQL backends or no SQL backends, because they talk to LDAP, because they talk to some kind of, they for some reason do something with OS commands. Any APIs that do that are scary in and of themselves, but I've seen them. Or they parse XML, which strangely strangely in the ironic sense of the word, a lot of APIs do. They are fed a bunch of XML and they parse them. They should be treating all XML they're fed as data. So you shouldn't actually be able to do the XML attacks, but it does still happen. And sometimes there's object relational mapping injection that I've seen. It's unusual, but it can still happen. Exercise number 8, which is in Postman. Oh, no. So we're going to use Postman to attempt to log in. So we're going to just log in with a username and password. Let's go with user1 and password, and we're going to hit send. Obviously, that's not going to work. You also know the reason I've done that is because I want to have this request in Zap, so I can use Zap. But if we're going to try fuzzing, what exactly is it we're going to try and do here? We're going to try some kind of injection attack, because this is essentially the same as if, this could just be a form somewhere, right? If this was a web app, this is literally just the login form with a username and password that's being passed into it. So we're going to use the same approach that we use with a SQL injection on a web app. We're going to apply the same logic to an attack here. 2 ways of doing it. I'll show you the Zap way, and then I'll show you the quick way, because it's SQL injection, and nobody spent a great deal of time preventing SQL injection in this app. Which means that by the time I've showed you the Zap way, I'm sure most of you will have already successfully attacked and hacked through this. So let me first go to Zap.
All right, Grant, let's try something.
Yo,
you tell me what to do, and I'll share my full screen Zap and get the pop-ups and everything.
Excellent. Awesome. Okay. Do you want to start by setting your font size to 20 and restarting Zap?
It actually is 20. It's just on a 4K monitor.
Aha. See. Okay, hang on. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to the slides. I'll just keep that open. You don't need to share my slide screen, but it's there in case you want to go back to it. Yeah, so in Zap, what I want you to do, and I have to open Zap to do it, is you're going to fuzz that username and password.
So just highlight this whole thing, right click.
So you're going to highlight, we're going to try and do a SQL injection. So you're going to highlight the username field. And what you want to do is get that to return true or false. So hang on, let me see if I must be looking at your screen. Yeah, so highlight the username field. And in there, I want you to right click and go fuzz. And you're going to add, see, that's the nice pop-up for fuzzing. As you can see there is already a fuzz location added. You're going to click on payloads. You're going to click on add to add a payload. You're going to add a file fuzzers. You're going to click on FuzzDB attacks, and you're looking for Sql Injection, and you select it.
Am I in the right spot here?
I think you are. So just scroll up slightly so I can see if that's.
That was in JBro Fuzz.
Okay, so if you, well, I'm sure it'll work too. But the one that I made use of was in FuzzDB. Oh, okay, you haven't got the attack. It's fine. So JBro Fuzz probably will provide you with the same one.
Okay.
You're looking for SQL injection. It's a MySQL injection. So try it. Just click on blind injection. Just let me see what's in there. Yeah, that should do it.
What about this guy?
Try the passive SQL injection. Down to, yeah, there we go. I just happen to know what I'm looking for because I know what the result is. Yeah, that'll do it. That'll definitely do it.
Right.
So just select that one and then click add, and then OK, and then start fuzzing. And of course, if you changed your fuzzing speed.
Sorry, I tried to follow along as fast as I could.
That's quite okay. So those of you who jumped ahead and went with, and let me drop it into, hang on, let me click add, let me click file fuzzers. Okay, start fuzzer. So you should see one that is substantially larger.
In the response size?
Yep.
258 bytes.
So there are a couple in there that'll say you've got errors in your SQL syntax, and all of that is like if we were doing fuzzing against a web app, these errors would help us to fine tune what the attacks are we're looking at. The attack that will work, the attack that definitely works, is let me share this screen. Is it 2 spaces? Nope. You know what it will do? It's going to be in there. So my bad, Scott, I led you astray. If you go back to Zap on your screen and you do the same fuzzing, but you do it against the password portion.
Oh,
so
password portion.
Yeah.
Right,
so you double click on the password, right click fuzz, and payloads, add, and go JBro Fuzz and SQL injection, and it's passive injection. And
Sorry.
start fuzzer.
Am I clicking too fast? I can't see my Discord.
Yeah, I have the same problem.
All right, cool. No one seems super lost, but hopefully this is helpful. All right, here we go.
I love that Kevin Schwaber's discovered that there is a dark mode for Zap. And ironically, Zap normally is in dark mode on my machine, but it does display better, more easy to read. And there you can see it. You've already got it at the top there. You saw reflected.
I got a lot.
And it's because it's variations on the or one equals one, the quote, or 1 = 1 dash. Yeah.
This guy right here.
So you'll see if you go to the response.
We got a tip in the Discord, Scott, that you have to clear the username.
Clear the
That's what's giving
username.
you that. One more time.
All right. Hey, you know, everybody's learning. Everybody's learning. So I go in here and then I take this and I do this.
Yep.
Maybe delete. Can I delete that?
You're better off doing that in the request itself.
All right. Okay. So like here.
Yeah. Can you delete it there? Oh, you can. So quick, easy way, Scott, is to right click on that. Right click on your open resend with request editor. And then change cut that out and paste it into the line below. Now, obviously, you'd set it up as a fuzzer, but paste it into the line below. Paste.
Just like that, right?
Yeah, just paste what you cut from the previous line.
Oh boy, I didn't do a cut. Here we go.
So this. Yeah, there we go.
All right. Paste. You just want me
Send.
to fire that off?
Yep. Success true. And you have an auth key. And if you grab that auth key and you dump it into the authorization token in the Postman. So if I do the same here, and I replace that with that.
Wait, this one. Sorry, I flipped back to your screen.
Yeah, so in the get secret, I literally grabbed the user login after successfully attacking it with Sql Injection, grab the auth key from there, and in the get secret, you replace the authorization token there, not as the variable, but you replace it with the actual value that you've now got, hit send, and then it returns the flag to you. Successfully attacked it. Just basic Sql Injection.
I got a flag. I got a flag.
Well done, Scott. Well done. Right, number 9. Oh, wait. Share, and share. So number 9 is improper assets management. Now, API assets referred to here are one of 3 things. They either refer to the version of API endpoints, or they refer to specialized debugging endpoints that should never be exposed to the outside world, right? They're debug endpoints for debug purposes. Or they're the API environments themselves, right? Either like low environments in develop through to integration, testing, staging, production, whatever that process looks like for your organization. So improperly managing, what do we mean by managing those assets? Well, what it boils down to is older versions of API are often retained for backwards compatibility. So that means that version 1 remains after version 2 has been released. Even if version 1 ends up with security issues, right? Even if none were known about version 1 when it was the only version, we now create version 2. We keep version 1 around for backwards compatibility. Down the line, somebody discovers some vulnerability in version 1. It's still going to be there, right? We're probably not looking at it. I don't know who is security testing their old API versions. Hint, we should all be. Or in fact, testing them for anything other than to make sure that no breaking changes have been introduced that would make the backwards compatibility aspect of that API no longer valid. So that's the first thing, mismanaging API versions. So not keeping older API versions as secure or as well tested as the current versions. The second one, debug. specific endpoints, endpoints that are deployed in debug mode for whatever reason, that expose debug information is almost certainly exposing too much information. The third type, so those different environments, sometimes what happens is you'll find common services that are shared between environments, like shared authentication mechanism. Or more commonly, you'll find that like integration leverages production services for things that change infrequently, like file upload service or something like that. Not that the file upload service hasn't produced enough PTSD for me to last a lifetime. But sometimes that can happen where you have lower environments sharing some production endpoint for some reason. It's the de facto standard. We never change it. Hasn't been changed in months, weeks, days, whatever is considered a long time for this particular environment. But what that also means is that sometimes we're sharing data between environments, or we're using production data to seed integration environments. It's a big issue, right? It's also improperly managing those assets. Even if some kind of process is put in place to ensure that the integrations data, which is taken from production for reasons usually being data in production doesn't look like our test data, and data in production, we can't produce sufficient quantities of test data in integration. So whatever the reasons are, we take production data and we clean it. Now the question is, how's that data cleaned and where is it cleaned? All of those things are asset management, and doing them improperly leads to some issues. So that's the important thing, right? Legacy brings old vulnerabilities. Debug almost certainly means information disclosure. Sharing or otherwise linking components can lead to components in lower environments potentially impacting the production environment. So not complete, not ready components being leveraged in some way in production, or data getting from production into lower environments, because we don't look after all environments the same way. We simply don't. Developers are given more access in lower environments for a good reason. It allows them to move fast and break things quickly because it's their environments. It doesn't affect business, but it can. The one we're going to look at now, though, is older versions of APIs, because that's far more common. It's far easier to test for. It's also, everything else is more about managing how you do things. So it's processes and people, where older versions is just, it's tooling. We can do a lot with tooling. So that's exercise 9, some tooling exercises. Now, I'm going to bring up let me share. Postman again. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to try and log in to this account using whatever value I might have in here. Hit send, returns 1. That's okay. So clearly that's password is correct. Try signing in as admin with some value as passwords. Oh. Don't break the JSON. That looks like I've successfully logged in, doesn't it? Surely I haven't, though. This is me being very confused. No, it's just sending 200 OK and a response of 1, no matter what I log in as. So clearly this is me not logging in successfully. So do you want to pull up Zap again, Scott?
Yeah, I do.
Cool. So what we want to do is we're going to try and fuzz that, right? We know that it's going to be some kind of number. It looks like a 4-digit number. So we're going to fuzz that 4-digit number. So you've done a post already with admin and a pin, and you're going to highlight that. You're going to right click and you're going to fuzz it. And you're going to say add a payload. Yeah. And the payload type you're going to add is numbers with a Z from 1000
Oops.
to 2. Yeah, that's a little too big.
I don't know what I hit there.
2.
Not negative, just regular 1.
Let's go to 2000. And we're going to hit add. And then you're going to hit start. Add and start fuzzer. And you'll see that you get 200 OKs, but you don't actually get any responses. You don't actually log in. And then suddenly you're getting server errors, internal server errors. Want to guess what's going on there?
I want to say rate limiting, maybe.
100% right. So clearly they had this come to Jesus moment with the developer who's building this API, and what was it? It would have been number 4, right? So yeah, API issue number 4, rate limiting. They said you need to fix that. So the developer said, okay, I'll fix it. And he did. And that's great. That's fantastic. What happens though? We can see by the API endpoint that this is API 9/v2 user login. Now that's a bit of a dead giveaway. Hopefully that wouldn't be what you'd see in a production environment. But what happens if you stop this fuzzing? And instead we went to change that. So first let's create a post request in Postman, and instead of hitting the V1 the V2 interface, we're going to hit V1. So literally just create a copy of that request. So if you right click on the post, yeah, that'll do. That's fine.
Just like that? Okay.
Yeah, that's fine. So if you hit send, you'll get the same response 1 back. If you go back into Zap, you'll now have you'll have a V1 API endpoint user post. And now you're going to do exactly the same thing. So you're going to apply the same attack. So you can add a payload, numbers from 1000. Oh. Actually, let's start at 1500, just because time. Yep, that'll do. Click OK. Click OK. Click Start Fuzzer. 200 OKs, still 200 OKs, still 200 OKs. Oh dear, still 200 OKs. So when we fixed this problem in V2, because obviously that's when the security team found it, we didn't go back and apply the rate limiting to the V1 of the API endpoint. And as you're about to see, we will eventually get the PIN for our admin user. It might just take a while.
Sorry, I turned down the threads on my fuzzer so that I could also stream. So yeah, everyone, I don't crush my machine and no one can see what's happening.
Yep, very, very grateful for that, Scott. Thank you. We're about 20 away now, having done this once or twice before.
All right. Boy, round trip time of 10 seconds. That's pretty slow API.
It's a really slow API.
It's like it's built in Ruby or something. Oh, don't hate me. It's just a joke.
It's worse. It's built in PHP. So if I hang on, have I led you astray here?
I don't know.
might have. I think I might have. I did lead you astray.
Oh no.
So the username should still be Richard Branson, because Richard Branson owns this wonderful airline, I'm guessing.
The username
So
should be Richard Branson. All right, I'm gonna use a trick that I learned just now.
Excellent. And that,
We're gonna go into Fuzz.
yeah.
And we're gonna hit this edit button right here.
And then you're going to change that to Richard Branson, one word.
Save it. And then we're still gonna add this thing and fuzz it.
Yep. This time start at 1600 and go to 2000. And start Fuzzer.
What's Richard Branson's pin? Hey Grant. If we figure this out, can we get on his spaceship?
Probably. We can probably buy a spaceship. It's probably the pin to his credit card, right? And I'm sure there's no limit on that.
Yeah, I want to get on the spaceship because he can just shut down his credit card. That's no good.
But I mean, if you use the credit card to buy a new spaceship, then it's your spaceship. You can get on it wherever you like.
Fair enough.
So if you sort by size of the response body, you should have a response that's bigger than 0. There it is. This is the one where it says 200 OK for everything, which is very useful. But it does actually return some values if you successfully log in. In this case, it returns the flag.
Sorry, I resorted so people can see what's going on here.
Yeah. And there you can see that you successfully logged in, user ID 1, Richard Branson, and the account balance is the flag. Because that's what we're after. We're after his money, right?
I like it.
Cool. Then I am down to, that's number 9. We're down to the last one, the final one, with a little bit of time to go. Plenty of time to go. So exercise 10, or number 10, is insufficient logging and monitoring. This is absolutely huge, right? So much so, in fact, that there is an OWASP project dedicated to benchmarking your logs, which you should definitely go check out. Without logging the right things, there's nothing to be able to monitor, though. So the two are intrinsically linked together. So what issues do you foresee coming up here? Right? APIs are written by developers for developers. Logging is generally done for the developers of the consuming applications, right? So it's generally relegated to error messages, being clear enough that when the API is used incorrectly or it has a data issue, the consuming service can go, wait, and then know what to do to fix it, or can talk to the API owner and say something wrong with data. Any logs that are retained for APIs are either to review the usage, so how much is this API getting used, perhaps allow for some performance monitoring, maybe, kind of, sometimes, or it's for the API developers themselves to be able to troubleshoot functional issues. Monitoring, if it's done at all, is probably done by developers or SRE teams, and they tend to focus only on the other non-functionals, like performance, because ownership of the non-functionals are not universally taken up by the DevOps crowd or by the SRE teams. This is a major problem, right? And this is the first time I have a slideshow up and I don't have the ISO 25010, which is the software quality model. I don't have a picture of that up here, but if you take a look at the ISO 25010, you'll see that there are firstly, there's functional requirements, functional correctness of the tooling must be high, and then it gradually goes from there down the list of things that people find important. Somewhere around there is performance, which is kind of the borderline reliability, performance, first performance, then reliability. And reliability is kind of like, that's where SRE sit. That's kind of like the border at which developers are involved and seriously engaged. Just one to the right of performance is security. And because ownership doesn't generally sit with the development team, they're not monitoring for it. They're certainly not concerned with it because there's a SOC to deal with it. Exercise 10, which is going to be a very interesting exercise. If you take a look in Postman, and I will quickly share Postman for that. Exercise 10 has the most awesome attack. And it is simply this. How best to show, by the way, if you actually went through this CTF and didn't get a single flag, you didn't go through all the way to the end, because there's one for free at the end. Just literally send that get flag request. And the message that comes back from the development team of this intentionally vulnerable application is, I didn't log and monitor all the requests that you've been sending. And it's true, right? Nothing is logged. If you go and look at the Docker that you spun up, nothing has been logged. There's no logs being kept. There's no exercise to do here. This is really about a conversation you need to have with the teams building APIs. And if you're building APIs, it's a conversation you need to have with yourself. What types of things should be monitored for? What types of things should be logged? And go use that benchmark. Go see how well you perform against the benchmark with the logs of the applications that you care about. And that covers all the hands-on stuff. I will see that whether I have anything more on my slides. But I'm pretty confident that we've covered everything. Yep. Literally just how to get a hold of me on LinkedIn and on Twitter. You guys are in the Discord channel, so you can ping me on Discord as well. I'm happy to chat, especially if you guys are working on, what was it, exercise 7. If you're building your core stuff, reach out to me. Just be prepared. You're going to have to get your hands dirty with a dirty browser. Or you're going to have to modify the actual Laravel code, so the PHP code in the vulnerable API to make it even more vulnerable, which will make Zap do a whole bunch of red stuff when you run against it. Which, by the way, if that's the approach that you're going to take, please do. I know that this team would be very happy to see a pull request saying, hey, I made exercise 7 more easily exploitable, and this is how you go about exploiting it. And with that, I'm going to switch across to Discord to see if there's any questions. This has been recorded. Hopefully the text is more visible when you look at the recordings later. At least you can zoom in and see a little bit more. I will put together a step-by-step guide breaking down this capture the flag on APIs, providing you with all of the tweaks and the modified files and strange things that I did to make it easier to do in Zap. But yeah, that's if there's, I mean, we've got 15, 20 minutes, right, Scott?
Yeah, we got a couple minutes. We got like 15 minutes and everyone's like 15-second delay. I just asked in Discord if anyone wants to run through any of the parts of Zap that we may have missed because of the window issue earlier. So I've still got my Zap going. If anyone wants to kind of run through anything or have Grant run me through something, maybe there's a setup, a total setup issue we can kind of walk through just to reintroduce people who got here late or any of that stuff. We can run through that again. And then there's a question about OWASP top 10 and API top 10.
Yeah. So Ferdinand is right for High Shrub. The 500 area you're getting with Postman plus Zap proxy setup. The issue isn't your Zap proxy or Postman. The issue is that you've got the HUD enabled, disable the HUD because for some reason it is causing that breakage. There's a, let me open the slide that shows you how to disable the HUD.
Oh, I got it.
Oh, you've got Zap open. Just
Yep.
Just click on that button right there to the right. There,
This button right here.
That one. Yeah, click on that, and you'll see it enables the HUD. Click it off, and it disables it. That's all you need to do. Disable the HUD, and then all these tricks and should work. By the way, if you run into issues like that on the OWASP Slack channel, the Zap team are incredibly active there. I see King Thorin is currently responding to somebody in Discord. Yeah, they're always happy to help out. And I think it was Simon that actually said to me, click on the button. And then it worked.
Awesome. There's another question about the Postman Collections.
Yeah, so the Postman
I'll
Collection.
walk through that here real quick.
The Postman Collection is actually part of the, or at least the test version or the preliminary version is part of the stuff that you downloaded when you cloned that repository. So that is.
Our faces are covering it.
Faces are covering the imports. Yeah, there we go.
Those guys.
So they're in the VAP folder under Postman. There's the two files you want to import.
And when you get the Docker Compose running, you can see, where did I do that? Docker Compose was up here. Docker Compose up.
Yep.
If you're using Docker Desktop, you'll have this sweet little dashboard here. It tells you all about all of the, I got a lot of stuff going.
Yeah.
But here's the VAP, database, www, and PHP my admin containers that are running in the background. So if you get that, that means the Docker containers are running.
Yep.
Let's see, what else did we do in this little workshop? We imported the Postman Collections just like that. Import each one of those at a time, and I think you just okay your way through them.
Yep, and then it'll create that folder with those API endpoints in there. That's the collection. Yep. And if you click on environments in your left-hand side there, you'll now have more details in the environment than you had before, because obviously it's also capturing auth as you do it. Yep. But you should have host in the top there.
Starts like this, just starts with just host in there.
Yep.
And then when you go back to our collections, the one thing that I got stuck on was changing this section from no environment to VAPI environment.
Yep.
That sets that variable for, let's see, let's look at one of these. Sets this variable in the request. So you can see, because of my environment, I now have localhost set up.
Yep.
And then there was one more thing, and that was over here.
You set up a proxy.
Proxies. Yep. So we're proxying that through localhost port 8080.
Yeah, so localhost port 8080 is the that's your environment, and just make sure that whatever you set up here, doesn't matter what you put in here, from a port perspective, as long as the port number in here is the same port number that you use in Zap. So when you go and configure Zap, and you can configure the proxy.
Where's that? Proxies, local proxies, this one.
Yeah, just make sure that that value there is the same as the one that you have in Postman. All of this will be in the write-up. It definitely, I will make sure that they are all in the slideshow, but they will definitely be in the write-up with common issues, common things as well.
Let's see. So there's a question about the Postman Collections. For the Postman Collections, I need to clone the repository from GitHub and then run the Docker command.
Yeah, you need to clone the repository from GitHub, and that gives you all of the details, including the Postman collection. When you run the Docker command, you actually go and fetch the necessary Docker images, and you build everything that you need to actually run the environment. Yeah. I will make sure the write-up has been on my to-do list for about 2 months now. the fact that I've now promised a bunch of people at ZAPCon that I will do it means that I will probably do it this weekend. So expect to, if you don't see like a giant post in this channel talking about where you can go get that write-up, expect me to be in this channel apologizing for not having done the write-up because something happened with my kids or something like that. But I will get it done this weekend, and it'll be up as soon as I can.
Yeah, and then the question about the Postman collections, cloning down the repository from GitHub will get you the collections. Running the Docker compose command will bring up the service that you're actually testing in this particular lab.
Yeah. King Thorin's asking about will it be added to the repo?
Ooh, he wants instructions in the repo.
Oh. Okay, well, I will submit a pull request with the how to hack it to the repo. I don't see a reason I can't. That sounds like a good idea. I will definitely do it. They might tell me it's a terrible idea to have it available in the repo, because the whole idea is that this is a capture the flag, right? Let me drop the. Have you got the GitHub link?
I got it.
Cool. And yeah, it's a great idea though, King Thorin. I definitely think it's a good idea to have it all in one place. I do think that the whole point of this kind of capture the flag should be to learn about these issues rather than actually trying to compete with each other, which is why I built it on this capture the flag. It's also more fun because you actually have demonstrable attacks for everything except, of course, logging and monitoring. Although I guess it's demonstrable in the fact that there's no logs in the Docker containers at the end of this whole.
I mean, there are logs in the Docker container, just not informative logs.
Yeah, nothing that would show that you attempted to attack them.
That's right. We can actually show that. Here's the logs that are happening. Opening and closing connections, and that's it.
Yeah.
I think that's it, Grant.
Excellent. This has been a lot of fun. I I will make sure that I get my machine working the way that it should. I.e., I will actually do this on my Mac, which would have worked properly. But I was really hoping I was going to get the APK running so I could actually do that live. It's way better hands-on, but getting the APK set up and working properly has been proven to be tough. So something to try and do for the next time. I plan to run these sessions as something that OWASP does, highlighting how awesome Zap is on a regular basis during the course of the year. I'll be chatting to them about that. So hopefully there'll be some news about that as well, about the whole session and a little bit more of the theory, and send devs to go listen to this, or send people who haven't been able to make it today to come see more of it. But I seriously want to thank Stackhawk. This has been fun, and it's always a lot of fun with you guys.
Thank you, Grant. This is super good content. Thank you for thanks all the attendees for kind of bearing through some of the technical issues Grant was having. Hopefully what we were working on there at the end was helping. I learned a bunch of stuff because I got to do the workshop too. Grant, thank you so much for the time that you put into working on the workshop.